Lakeland Public Television, the Bemidji Pioneer, the Brainerd Dispatch, and Northern Community Radio are proud to present Debate Night 2016, a look at our area legislative candidates. And now the State House of Representatives District 5B debate. Your moderator tonight is Warren Larson.
Well, thank you and good evening. Welcome to Debate 2016, 11 state legislative debates over 4 nights. We're at the Lakeland Public Television studio in Bemidji. Our candidates tonight for this debate are Sandy Layman from the Republican Party, Dennis Barsness from the Green Party, and Tom Unzels, the Democratic Farm Labor Party. Our panel tonight is Dennis Wyman, Lakeland Public Television News Director, Matthew Lidke from the Bemidji Pioneer Reporter, Heidi Holton, News and Public Affairs Director, Northern Community Radio, KAXE and KBXE. Our rules for tonight's debate. Each candidate will be allowed 3 minutes for opening comments. Our panel will ask questions after the opening comments. Some will be their own questions, others may be from the public. The candidates will rotate the order they speak, beginning with opening comments and finishing with closing comments. Each candidate gets 2 minutes to answer the questions. Each candidate will have a 1-minute rebuttal opportunity. New this year, candidates will have the option of using 1 minute of bonus time to add on to one of their answers tonight. This can be used during the answer to the initial question or during the rebuttal, but can only be used once. Questions continue until we are about 50 minutes into the debate when we move on to closing comments. Each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for their closing comments. Now, let's begin the debate. All right, so we will have Sandy Layman with the first opening comments.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for having us here tonight. We really appreciate this opportunity. It's really our only opportunity to have a televised candidate debate. So we appreciate this, and we especially appreciate the panelists. I know it's been a long day for you. Well, what happens in St. Paul matters. And as your state representative, my job will be to be a bridge between here and the Capitol. A strong voice and a determined advocate that makes the voices of our communities heard in St. Paul. What happens in St. Paul matters to your families because decisions in St. Paul affect rural health. It affects how well our kids get educated. It affects whether communities get important infrastructure like roads and bridges and high-speed internet. Whether our wood products and our mining industries have access to Minnesota resources, and whether our small businesses can continue to be competitive. What happens in St. Paul is important. You want the person you send as your representative to know her constituents, to be principled, and to exhibit the common sense, hard-working leadership that our region and our state needs. That is why I am running to be your representative. My roots run deep in northern Minnesota. My husband and Bill and I were young parents when we moved to Itasca County. We weren't entirely sure how we were going to make a living, but we did see that the area gave us a great opportunity to raise our family in a healthy and unique way. That's key to why I'm campaigning for this public office. I want to ensure that other young families get the same chance we had to educate our kids well, prepare them for life, and have access to the great outdoors. For nearly 30 years, I have worked successfully as a citizen, not as a politician, in business and community development. I served as the president of the Grand Rapids Area Chamber of Commerce, the president of the Itasca Area Economic Development Organization, and as commissioner of the IRRB, appointed by the governor. Lately, I've been lending my experience as a consultant and as an adjunct faculty member to the College of St. Scholastica. In my work, I've seen all kinds of businesses, from mom-and-pop resorts to multi-billion-dollar corporations. I've recruited businesses and I've supported small entrepreneurs. I know from the inside and from the policy side what's worked and what hasn't. As a commissioner, I balance labor and management interests to achieve win-win solutions. One thing I can tell you is that we have the kind of people here who have what it takes to make strong businesses. My goal in this election is simple. I want to be your effective advocate to dissolve the long distance between here and the Capitol and ensure that our issues are represented, our concerns are addressed, and our voices are heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next opening comment comes from Dennis Barsness.
Well, thank you. Again, my name's Dennis Barsness. Who I am, actually, I'm a born-again disciple of Christ Jesus. I'm a pastor in a small fellowship. I've been a lifetime resident of Itasca County. I've made this place my home. I've raised 2 children in it, held a variety of jobs, and had a couple of small business ventures. And currently I do work as a PCA and a local handyman. My reasoning for wanting to run for office and be a representative to the people is I've seen too much of the big money in politics and how the fixed system with the 2 parties is it's tearing the people apart. There's far too much corporate and political action committee involvement, and I am the only candidate that refuses corporate money, political action committee money. Anything I've done has been by my own funding or by a few select local residents and small businesses. Again, my desire is to be out there for the people and representing their needs, putting the people over the profits, and trying to bring some of the community back together that I remember growing up here through my younger days. The way it's become now with the rising unemployment and the really poor job market that we do have, I see a need for a substantial change in the job market where we got jobs that can be relied upon to be there for future times. It's none of this boom and bust. The short longevity, in a sense, is really what's causing a lot of problems. Another aspect is just the personal safety that a lot of people in my area have concerns for nowadays, and I want to make this a community again where people feel safe to be out in the streets, and they can go to bed and lay their head down on their pillow without having to be in fear for all the various things, especially their personal safety. Thanks.
All right. Mr. Anzels.
Thank you, Warren, and thank you, panel members. And thank you to everyone who had a hand in sponsoring this debate. You know, I'm really quite confident that at the end of this debate, we will all be able to say that this was civil and respectful, and we all learned something from each other, quite unlike what occurred last night. I am born and raised in northern Minnesota. I live on a lake in the Chippewa National Forest. It's been an honor and a privilege to have been a teacher and a coach, a public administrator in state government, a labor official for one of our great building and construction trades unions. I've been a county commissioner. I've been active in public life all of my life. But really and truly, it was those great public schools that gave me my start and gave so many people of my generation their start in life. And in fact, as a young boy growing up in a mining location right next to the mine in a company house, it was those great public schools and those great public school teachers who provided me my passport out of poverty. And for that, I will always be grateful. And it's that experience that motivates me in my job as your state representative. You know, Sunday nights when I get ready to pack up and leave and go back down to St. Paul, it's not the wealthy or the well-off or the connected or the lobbyists that I think about. I think about the nurse, I think about the police officer, I think about the carpenter, the laborer, I think about the paper maker at the mill in Grand Rapids. I think about the steel worker at Hibbing Taconite. I think about the people who are my neighbors and my friends and the people whose opinions I value the most. And it is that experience and that motivation that has allowed me to represent all of the people of District 5B, regardless of their status in life or regardless of where they live, with dignity and honor, and I would like it to continue.
All right. Well, thank you. Now we'll move on to questions. Our first question goes to Mr. Anzels, and it comes from our panelist, Heidi Holton.
Mr. Anzels, we know that rural Minnesota has an older population, specifically the District of 5B. Are there things you think we should do to attract younger residents for the future of our small towns and cities, but yet continue to serve older residents?
Great question. We have to always continue to learn from our elders, and I believe we do in our communities. Like most of us, I am very, very concerned about the lack of economic opportunity and jobs in northeastern Minnesota for our young generations. We educate our kids, we raise them well, we give them the values that motivate us in life, and then all too often our young families have to go away, leave, and go to where the jobs are. That's happened to me, quite frankly. I'm the proud father of 3 daughters. It was a catastrophe in 2000 when they lost their mother to cancer, and I have been very much involved in their lives and with my grandchildren. But the fact remains, they chose not to remain in northern Minnesota. They received their college educations and got their jobs in the Twin Cities metropolitan area. I'm sure we'll talk about diversifying this economy a little later in our debate, but of course that's what has to happen. We don't have the luxury of picking and choosing what jobs we'd like to have in northern Minnesota. We have mining, we have forestry, we have resorts and tourism, and we can't turn our backs to any other job creation activities that come our way. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well, especially in connection with Iron Range Resources.
All right. Well, thank you. Mrs. Layman, the same question.
So the question is, how do we accommodate our elderly population while still providing amenities for our young people?
Or attracting new residents.
Or attracting new young families. Okay. Well, I remember, I've lived in Grand Rapids, the Grand Rapids area now for 39 years. And I've been around long enough to remember serving on the Rapids 2000 task force, when the year 2000 seems so far in the future we could hardly imagine it. But one of the task forces that was led by a wonderful gentleman who's now deceased, Ken Hickman, was looking at the demographic shift that we saw coming. And we were talking about preparing the community to accommodate elderly. And we talked about putting in, making a pedestrian-friendly downtown, for instance. Even biking paths in the area. So many of the things that we talked about, we have today because we planned so long ago. I think that many of the things that we are doing for our elderly population really do make the communities attractive for young families. Young families move here because they love the outdoors, they want to be able to participate in the outdoors, as do the elderly. I think that there are many other issues with the elderly, and the YMCA, for instance, in Grand Rapids has just started the Active Living Center that brings young children in the daycare together with elderly who come for activities. I think that's a fabulous example of cross-generation opportunities. So I think we really need both. My passion is in bringing young families to the area. I think for a community to grow, we need to have that. But the fact of the matter is that our population is aging, and we need to accommodate that demographic.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Barsness? Same question.
Okay, and and once again, our elderly are, to me, they really are very important. Actually, part of my work, does deal with elderly people. And, part of the problem with some of the younger generation is the big age difference where dignity doesn't get transferred back and forth. Part of it is a little bit of an entitlement issue going on with the younger generation versus I've seen it all with the older generation. As far as what we can do to make it more beneficial to get more younger people in, because we need the younger people here to be taking care of the elderly. They're the ones that are doing the working, paying more taxes and the various aspects, and we do need to generate various forms of employment that these younger people can sustain families on. And again, like Tom says, I'm sure we'll be discussing some of that later, but it's a tough line or a tough thing to really come into a good plan for the future with it, just because of the fact of we don't have the resources, in a sense, to sustain a large growth population at the moment.
Okay. Mr. Anzelst, any rebuttal?
Ms. Holton, it is not enough to attend meetings and admire problems and have participation in task forces. The people are tired of meeting after meeting after meeting. The people want results. I've delivered results. The project at the Y that the Commissioner has spoken about was largely accomplished through funding from the taconite production tax. I'm the chairman of the IRRB. Tom Saxog and I led the way for that funding. The Rife Center, our jewel for culture and the arts in Grand Rapids, has been funded largely through the work of Iron Range Resources and state government, Senator Saxog and myself. It's not enough to simply attend meetings. There's a lot more in getting problems solved.
Okay, thank you. And Mrs. Layman, any rebuttal?
Sure. I think that many of the projects, probably many of the larger projects in northeastern Minnesota, have some IRRB participation. When I was commissioner, I found it seemed as though that was the case. The IRRB has tremendous financial resources and is able to provide grants, is able to provide business loans, and generally likes to participate in most viable projects. However, projects like the Active Living Center and the Miles Rife and any other large capital project also depends on private donations. I've been pleased to be a part of many of our citizens that have donated to those projects. The Blandon Foundation, as a private foundation, also donates. It takes a lot of players who have to come together in meetings before a project actually is produced.
Okay, and Mr. Barsness, any rebuttal?
Okay, well, and once again, we do have up in my area, and again, we got some nice advancements going on with the Advanced Living Center and the various aspects for the elderly, and I look forward to seeing more of that coming up. I'm anxious, and I do look forward to what we can do for the younger generation to get them here to sustain it all.
Okay. Next question goes to Mr. Barsness, and it is from Dennis Wyman.
I want to talk about mining, obviously a big part of northeastern Minnesota. Two projects in particular, the Twin Metals project, the $3 billion underground copper nickel mine near Ely, and also Polymet, the copper nickel mine. that the state DNR has approved the EIS for, so the company can pursue state permits. The U.S. Forest Service and Army Corps of Engineers, though, have not signed off on it. Supporters and opponents disagree if the AIS analysis was good enough. What are your thoughts on these two projects?
Well, you know, I knew I'd have to answer this question. I'm just going to state it straight up. I am totally opposed to the sulfite, the copper, nickel, precious metal minings. There's really nothing at this point anybody can say that's going to get me to change my mind on it, and that has a lot to do with some of the constituents behind me. I believe there's another way, and in the future, if somebody can show me guaranteed results without the pollution problems, you know, I'll listen. But I just think at this time that we got some other areas we can look into. We could look into like industrial hemp and aspects like that. The possibilities with that are just unlimited. And rather than calling ourselves, you know, a mining community, which we are, we still have to look at we are more than just mining. We have forestry, we have other areas that we can be. We don't have to be just a mining community. And again, like I said, there's really not a lot anybody could say at this point to make me change my mind on the precious metal minings.
Okay. Mr. Anzels.
I know mining. I was born in a mining company house. I was born right next to the mine. We didn't have a car. My dad walked to work. But that was iron ore mining. Copper nickel mining is quite a bit different. And the location of the mineral body is a lot more environmentally fragile than is the mineral body where the iron ore is. Nevertheless, with regard to polymet, the politicians need to take a step back. The science and the scientists need to take a step forward. And we need to let science be our guide and be our guide in terms of the pathway to developing the technology that will lead to the polymet mine being fully permitted and those 350 jobs being created at the polymet site. With regard to twin metals, I believe Governor Dayton erred in his decision to stop the drill core sampling in the area of the twin metals development. If you don't know what's under the ground, you don't have any development when it comes to mining. All twin metals wanted to do there was to continue their drill core sampling to determine the quality of the ore body. We need jobs. We don't have the luxury to pick and choose which jobs we want, but we need jobs that are safe and environmentally sound, and I think that can be accomplished.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Layman?
Yes, I hear a public service announcement every now and then on KXC that says something like, if it's not farmed, it's mined. And that's true. In order to have many of the products that we use in the 21st century, someone needs to mine those minerals. Someone needs to create those products. And that's the case today. Minnesota is blessed with an abundance of natural resources, both timber and minerals. And we've had copper, nickel, even gold, platinum, palladium reserves for some time. We've known we've had them. We're discovering more all the time. The issue has been we haven't had the technology that has allowed us to mine those minerals in an environmentally sound fashion. It appears that today we may have that technology. And the first evidence of that is the fact that Polymet has passed all of the tests for years and years and years, hundreds of millions of dollars of tests. And it looks like they're ready to go. Now, Polymet is an open pit situation, a little bit different than twin metals, which would be an underground mine. It would be less intrusive than the Polymet. But Northeast Minnesota has been combining mining and tourism and other endeavors for over 100 years. You could say that we're a center of excellence. Unfortunately, the DFL party that my opponent is a part of is considering a resolution to officially oppose all mining in the state of Minnesota. And in fact, it's been brought up twice in front of the DFL at various committees, but they have delayed a vote until December of this year. Now, I ask the viewers, why a vote in December? Well, probably because the elections are in November.
Okay. Mr. Barsness, any rebuttal?
Yeah, I mean, as well, I grew up in a mining family. I've had various jobs in the mines my own self, and I've seen, in just the iron mines, what they entail of. I've been in and around the precious metal mines a slight bit, and I've seen what they entail. To me, I believe the short term of the boom and bust industry and the small amount of jobs, it's just not worth it at this time.
Okay. Mr. Anzels, rebuttal?
Commissioner, I don't mean to disappoint you, but Tom Anzels will not be voting for any resolutions or motions or legislation or anything else to stop mining in northeastern Minnesota. As I've said before, and I'll say again, we live in northern Minnesota. We don't have the luxury to pick and choose what jobs we'd like to have. We need them all.
Okay. Ms. Layman, any rebuttal?
Well, just one. Representative Enzel, I know that you personally support mining, and I believe that all the members of the Iron Range delegation support mining. No, that should be true. The problem is when you go down to St. Paul, you elect as a leader Paul Thiessen, who does not support mining. And the DFL legislators that are out of the metro do not support mining. When I go to St. Paul, I will have a Speaker of the House, Kurt Doubt, who is a strong advocate of mining, and I'll have over 70 GOP legislators who are also rallying around mining. So as admirable as your position is, it's very tough. It's got to be very tough for you not to have the support you would like to have in St. Paul.
All right, we'll move on to our next question, and that goes to Mrs. Layman, and it is from Matthew Lidke.
Yes, I'd like to ask about the bonding issue carrying over from the previous legislative session to the next one. If elected, would you support passing last year's or last session's bonding bill? And what are your thoughts if the issue of the light rail comes up again with the bonding bill?
Thank you for that. Yes, the bonding bill and the tax bill were two really important bills that in the last hours fell apart. And it's really unfortunate because many of the people I talk to want to see bipartisanship in St. Paul. They want to see people working across the aisle on projects, and that's what happened with the bonding bill. That's what happened with the tax bill. And unfortunately, both became very political at the end. And the bonding bill was ready to go, went to the Senate, and the Senate inserted the Southwest Light Rail, knowing that the House was not going to pass that. Now the governor has worked it out so that local taxpayers are paying for the construction of the rail line, so I doubt that that's going to come up again. And I would very much like to see that bonding bill. The bonding bill has many projects that are important to our region and important to the voters of 5B. So yes, I would support the bonding bill, and we wish that there had been a special session. I would hope that it is something that's taken up very early on in 2017.
All right, thank you. Mr. Anzels, same question.
Commissioner, your recollection of those last many hours of this last legislative session are incorrect. House Republicans didn't show us their bonding bill until the very end. There was no time for public hearing. There was no time for public debate. There was no time for amendment. There was no time for discussion. And that's been quite typical of the way in which Speaker Doubt and the Republican majority have managed the precious time of the Minnesota House of Representatives. Now, the St. Paul Pioneer Press named me as one of the 5 most bipartisan members of the entire House of Representatives. The long and short of it is, if you can't get me to come to the table and sit down and roll up your sleeves and cut a deal and find common ground somewhere, then you're not trying very hard. And the Republicans didn't try very hard. They have just a maniacal opposition to all things transit in the metropolitan area, and they insisted on transportation projects which were earmarks, and they just happened to be in vulnerable Republican members' districts. Now that was a recipe for a train wreck, and that's due to the way Kurt Doudt and the House Republicans managed the precious time of the House of Representatives. I'll tell you what, we can do better. And northern Minnesota lost a lot of good bonding projects because Republicans are more interested in the next election than in serving the people.
Okay. Mr. Barsness.
Well, myself, and I'm like Tom says, I'm willing to sit down, roll my sleeves up, and not leave the table until the problems are solved. I don't have a lot of time to just sit around and wave my hands in the air, and I don't believe none of the other people do either. There is a lot of issues that go on where things get brought in at the last minute, and there's a lot of dissent between the two parties, with the Republicans and the Democrats. And I don't know how to cross them lines other than doing what I'm doing and being that one candidate that's going to go in there and not be on one side or the other, and the guy that's saying, hey, let's sit down and let's nobody leave this table until this is done. If we got to go into overtime, I guess that's what we got to do. The people here are what's important, and that's what it is to me.
All right. Mrs. Layman, any rebuttal?
Well, I think that Representative Enzel and the House Republicans probably have 2 different viewpoints on what happened in the last hours. I think probably more than likely Senator Tom Bach lost control of his Senate majority when he was attempting to get the bonding bill through the Senate and wasn't able to keep the Southwest Light Rail off of the bill. And so it failed in the last hours. I would like to say that if I am elected and I go to St. Paul, I would really like to see one of the endeavors that we undertake is looking at how we conduct our business in those last hours. Something has to change. Every session, we say the same thing. We say, well, this is the way it always is. Well, that isn't the way it always should be. And I think we need to have reforms so that people aren't left holding the bag after months and months of work and having nothing to show for it.
Okay. Mr. Enzel's rebuttal?
Well, Commissioner, Senator Bach has nothing to do with the Minnesota House of Representatives. The majority Republican Party and Speaker Doudt need to take responsibility about how it is they manage the legislative process. And the truth of the matter is they are terrible managers of time. They are terribly uninterested in allowing the public to participate in the process. Committee hearings were not held. Major decisions were made behind closed doors. It was not good for democracy. And this has gone on each of the last 2 years. And my friend Dennis Barsness is right. The two parties are heading always in a collision fashion at the end of the session. Lack of collegiality is a very serious problem.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Barsness, a rebuttal?
I don't have much to rebuke on that. Thank you for acknowledging me, Tom. And, like I said, I don't have a lot of time, and neither does anybody else, to be just pointing the blame. And it's got to stop in a sense of, okay, the past is the past, this has happened, what do we do today, and how can we get this done so we can move on?
Right, thank you. Next question is to Mr. Anzels, and it's from Heidi Holton.
Mr. Anzels, so elections can be contentious, election advertising can be contentious. Once you are elected to office, how will you work with your opposition, but also how will you go back to your constituents and your allies once you've made some compromises? And examples would be great to each of you on this kind of question when you've done this before.
My neighbors who know me best know that I can cut a deal, that I am the type of person that can see the other person's point of view. But I have my principles, and I like a good argument. But at the end of the day, we need to do the people's work. As I stated earlier, the St. Paul Pioneer Press named me one of the 5 most bipartisan members of the entire House. I'm pretty proud of that. I'm a results-oriented person. I understand the art of compromise. I've been endorsed by nurses, police officers, the Farm Union, the Farm Bureau, virtually every group of workers that we have in our state, and they've endorsed me because they know that I'm results-oriented and that I can get things done. And you know, being a legislator, you can't gloat when you win, and you can't go away and sulk when you lose. You have to get up and make your arguments and make your points of view just as passionately the next day as you did in the previous day. And that's a skill that unfortunately, some legislators don't have. They take losing too seriously, and they overdo those days in which they win. We are all in this together. We are one state. We have to do the people's work.
All right, Mr. Barsness.
Well, for me, when I go down to the state, and no offense, Tom or Sandy, but when I win this election, to me it's not as important being the third-party candidate. I do take pride in doing that, and I have my reasons for it. But my loyalties begin with the people. And I will sit down with Republicans, Democrats, it don't matter what party you're at, because we are here for the people. And I will sit down as a people person with any of my constituents. My contact information is out there, and anybody can contact me at any time for any reason. But I'm also willing to go to my newly made friend in Sandy and my friend Tom here for any kind of input, because this would be more than just me. I would need anybody's kind of input and help to do this. And I make myself available to them because I represent a class of the people that they're probably not touching. And they're representing and come from classes of people that I wouldn't be able to touch. So it does take a vast group effort of all of us working together at this to make this a better place, a safer place for all of us.
Right. Mrs. Layman?
Well, I've spent my 30-year career working with a variety of people, diverse people from across the region for our common good. And that involves a lot of compromise, a lot of give and take, and we are working always for win-win solutions. Took me a while to learn that. It's something you grow into, and you realize that the long-term, the more sustainable solutions are those where everybody gets something, but maybe not everything. I think one of the divides in St. Paul, besides the two-party partisan divide, is a growing divide between rural and metro. And that's troublesome because in order to have a strong Minnesota, we need to have a strong metro. We love the metro, but we need to have a strong rural as well. We don't want everybody moving to the metro. That wouldn't be sustainable. So I am looking forward to working with metro people as well as the rural people from across the state and working across the aisle. But it's also important to maintain strong ties and communication with my constituents back home. During my campaign, I have a newsletter that does that. I would expect that I would continue that as one mechanism, but also being responsive and listening.
All right, so that we can get in more questions, we won't do a rebuttal on that particular question, and we'll move on to the next question, and it goes to Mr. Barsness, and it's with Dennis Wyman.
All right, thanks, Warren. And feel free if you feel you need to have a rebuttal to the last question. Use part of this time to do that. Just a real simple question. What can be done to reinvigorate the economy in your district?
Mr. Barsness.
I wish I had the magic answer. I don't know if there is one, but I think there is various aspects that can come about. Like I said, I'm a big proponent of industrial hemp, and I believe the possibilities in it are unlimited, from the actual growing and harvesting and the various aspects to production of various food products, healthcare products, textiles. It's a safe, it would put a lot of people to work. It would be something that would be there for future generations. That's about, one thing that I can say that I would be pushing for.
All right, Mrs. Layman.
Well, one of the keys to invigorating an economy is to create a positive business climate, and that covers a lot of areas, obviously. That's having a fair tax system. It's having regulations that are not burdensome to business, are not duplicative, are not one size fits all. And as I'm learning a little bit more about farming, because there's more farms in Cass County than there are in Itasca County, I'm learning that many of the issues in farming are the very same issues that small business owners face. So there's a lot of commonality there. Transportation is really key. I mean, really good roads and bridges to bring people and goods back and forth in the community is important. But then through my 30-year career in economic development, what I have learned is that there is no one answer. You need to do a little bit of recruitment, but the real focus needs to be on working with businesses that are here. That's 80% of economic development. Taking those businesses where the owners already have skin in the game, they already have made that big risk to employ people and have the responsibility of writing those paychecks every week. Those are the people you want to help. Currently, I'm just the past chair of the Entrepreneur Fund board, still serve on the board, and we are focusing on what we call stage 2 businesses. And that's looking for the businesses that are at $1 million revenue and helping them get to $2 million. We're having great success in that, and I think that in the legislature, we need to look at where those successes are and support those organizations that are able to provide that help.
All right, thank you. Mr. Anzels.
Thank you. You know, the lofty platitudes that you just heard won't create one full-time job. Might create a few jobs for lawyers, lobbyists, and professional meeting attenders, but I don't see any real jobs being created. So specifically, what needs to happen is paper makers need to be motivated to partner with the state, partner with the IRRB, to develop product lines beyond paper. There are chemical applications, biofuel applications, there are major technological innovative ideas out there. We need to work with our paper makers to help them diversify their product line. Secondly, I've written about the electric arc furnace technology and the fact that it would be a really bad idea to squander away the Iron Range's last remaining high-quality ore body on making just conventional taconite pellets. It's the electric arc furnace market that is the future, The traditional blast furnace market is the past. And lastly, quite specifically, but I have to be a little bit careful here because this may be premature, but everybody should watch the October 17th board meeting of the IRRB. We've got a real exciting, innovative project that we've been working on, especially the City of Grand Rapids, Mayor Adams and his economic development staff, Rob Mattei, and we've got something potentially quite exciting coming on October 17th.
All right, thank you. Mr. Barsness, any rebuttal?
Sure, and I am aware that there is a couple exciting things, I guess, actually coming up in the Grand Rapids area, and I'm happy to see that. I would like to see more. I believe that we can get more environmentally type friendly industries up into this area. Things are different now than they used to be with the transportation and everything, and we can move some of the things that have generally been for the metro areas, we can bring them up north, and we can employ the people in their home areas, promoting local economies versus educating all of our youngsters and sending them off to the metro area. If we can have some things going on here that will keep them here, it's going to make a better economy for everybody.
Okay. Mrs. Layman, any rebuttal comments?
Just a rebuttal to Representative Enzel. I think that one of the reasons Representative Enzel doesn't like to have a focus on creating a positive business climate is because he's been part of the legislature that raised taxes by $2.4 billion. And I have 2 pages from 2013. I can hardly read it because the print is small, but 2 pages of taxes and fees that were levied against taxpayers in Minnesota just in one session. And that was the session where the governor was DFL, the House was DFL, the Senate was DFL, and they sort of had the run of the House. That doesn't help create a positive economic climate. And while there's very specific projects that come and go, some of them work, some of them don't, overall, if you're not working at creating a good economic climate and the infrastructure that's required, whether that be Iron Range Rail Initiative that's happening or roads and bridges, you will not have long-term success.
Okay, Mr. Enzel, any?
Well, we still haven't recovered from the recession and the corresponding Pawlenty years, the way Governor Pawlenty solved the state's budget crisis. But we're working at it, and it takes investments, whether it's higher education, early childhood, child care, K-12 funding formulas, transportation. All of these things require resources and investments. And I'm proud to say that middle-class taxpayers have benefited from the policies of the Democrats. The wealthy, the rich, the well-connected, they benefit by the Republican policies.
All right. Now we have to move on to closing comments. And each candidate has 2 minutes to close. And our first candidate to close is Mr. Enzels.
Well, thank you very much. Over the past several months, I've actually gotten to enjoy my 2 opponents. I enjoy visiting with them at these functions and debates. It keeps me on my toes. It keeps me sharp. And that's what our great democracy is all about. There are some things I don't like. I don't like some of the nasty ads and some of the distortions of my record that have occurred, but we'll get beyond that. I'm asking the voters of District 5B to re-elect me to the State House of Representatives. They know me. They know me well. They know my values. They know that I care about kids. They know I care about the elderly and seniors in long-term care. They know I care about health care. They know I care about their pensions. And they know that when I'm in St. Paul, starting on Monday, they know that they are getting representation irrespective of where they live, from Pine River to Balsam Township, from Bacchus to Deer River, they know that I represent all of the people with all of my energy in my heart, and they know that I do an excellent job of constituent work. Some of the constituent work gets to be very complex and time-consuming, but I do it because I enjoy my work, and I'm asking the people to send me back to the legislature on November 8th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mrs. Layman, closing comments.
Sure. I'd like to address my closing comments very specifically to the voters in House District 5B. As a longtime resident of the Grand Rapids area, I've gotten to know many of you through our shared service on behalf of the region. It's been wonderful to connect with you during the campaign and hear about your priorities and your concerns. You're having a hard time paying for your high-cost health care bills. You're struggling maybe to find work, as some of the folks I've talked to at the door. Or maybe you're looking to expand a business and you're finding that it's difficult in Minnesota. You're watching our schools and our colleges struggle without adequate funds. Oftentimes it feels like northern Minnesota is not getting the attention that it should be getting in St. Paul. For nearly 30 years, I've worked successfully as a citizen, not as a politician, in community and economic development. I have a proven track record of standing up for our region's needs and taking a balanced approach for win-win solutions. In the legislature, my priorities will include advocating for common sense government that protects our natural resources while promoting responsible development and growing sustainable jobs. I will work to reduce regulations and obstacles to rural economic growth. I will fight for our fair share of state resources to support our schools and increase training so students can earn careers. And I will work to reduce health care costs for families and Main Street businesses. My husband Bill and I came to Itasca County 39 years ago looking for a good place to raise a family. This area totally exceeded our expectations. My passion, if elected, is to put my experience and energy to work to ensure that young families who wish to relocate or to move to the community can have that same opportunity. I'm an independent leader. I'm ready to start on day one, and I hope to earn your vote on November 8th.
Well, thank you. And Mr. Barsness.
Okay, and I'd like to say, again, thank you to the panel for the good questions, and also that, to me it's a privilege to be able to sit here alongside Tom and Sandy and to be a candidate for this elected office. And I believe, I come from the people, and I believe in for the people, by the people, and that by the people is just what it says. That means all of us need to be involved. And I would like to see more people, like myself, take the initiative, get involved, because that's what makes this country what it is. You want to talk about greatness, and it is when we all work together for better things. I just look forward to the day when I get more opportunity to work with more people that put their input into the pot so we can take a bigger picture out of what everybody really wants and what everybody really needs, and how we can move things along into a more prosperous, greater northern Minnesota. Because the way it is right now, things aren't looking good, and there's a lot of things that people aren't being told. We can turn it around and have the dignity, the respect for one another, the job security, and just that common sense of this is a community, not just a place we all live. A place where everybody gets along and neighbors help each other like it used to be.
Well, thank you very much. And again, I would like to take this time to thank each of the candidates for participating in the debate tonight. I have a great amount of admiration for individuals who are willing to serve our communities and our great state of Minnesota. If you missed any portion of tonight's debate and would like to watch it again, it will be available on Lakeland Public Television website within 24 hours. That website is lptv.org. You can listen to audio of the debate at kaxe.org. And remember, tomorrow, Tuesday, October 11th, 7 p.m., Senate District 2, Paul Utke, Republican, and Senator Rod Skoy, DFL, will be here, and we'll have debates again tomorrow night. Thanks and good night.